Welcome to the podcast where sustainability gets real. I'm Alan Stenson, I'm your host, and in each episode we uncover the people, ideas and actions driving the journey to net zero. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Emission Possible. This is our third episode. Today we have a very special episode in store. We're going to be really focusing on the social side of the ESG conversation. Today's guest is someone whose story has not only moved me very deeply, but has inspired many thousands of others to think differently about purpose, about resilience, and what it means to create lasting impact, especially in the face of unimaginable personal tragedy. Jordan Adams is one half of the FTD Brothers, a powerful advocacy movement he co-founded with his brother Kian after tragically losing their mum to frontotemporal dementia, which is a rare, devastating early onset condition. I have so much admiration for the courage, the purpose and the generosity you've shown in turning such a personal and painful journey into something that's benefiting so many other people. The legacy you're building both through your advocacy and through how you choose to live your life is so powerful, and I know it will resonate very, very well indeed with our audience. I'm really pleased to have you on the pod, Jordan. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you, Alan. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation, and thanks. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Right, Jordan, you recently left your full-time job to dedicate yourself completely to raising awareness, supporting research, and to build this platform. Choosing to work with ethical partners that reflect your values is to me a very powerful form of social sustainability, and is clearly something that is important to you. But before we get into that, could you really share with us, or for anyone who doesn't know of your journey so far, your words, your story, how you and Kian found purpose in advocacy, and how the FTD Brothers really started?
Sure, yeah. So obviously, going off your introduction, I am one half of the FTD Brothers, as I'm known by kind of thousands of people across our social media platforms now today. But this journey really started way back in kind of 2008, 2009. When we started to notice small but subtle changes in my mum. So I grew up in a small town of Redditch, just outside of Birmingham, to amazing parents, was blessed with ample opportunity during childhood, from holidays to education, everything you could really dream of, being taken to any sports matches up and down the country that me and my siblings needed to go to, or our mum was our biggest fan, would always be on time to pick us up. And so when you have somebody who's so vivacious, so kind, and kind of the beating heart of your family, doesn't take long to notice small but subtle changes in their personality and their behaviour. And it was around this period of 2008, 2009 that we started to notice small changes in my mum's personality. She became far more socially withdrawn. She went through extended periods of low mood and depression. And kind of the first big alarm bells ringing for myself and my older sister at the time, because Kian was only 7 or 8 years old, was that on a Saturday afternoon during the summer, my mum called Kennedy to ask her where she was. She was sat outside of school waiting to pick her up. And that was just totally out of character of my mum, to forget that it was a weekend and that she didn't need to be picked up from school. It was just something my mum wouldn't get wrong. And that's kind of the first memorable thing I kind of that sticks out in my mind, that I think of, okay, something's not right with mum, something is wrong with her health and her well-being. And obviously we went home, Kennedy expressed that to my dad at the time, and I think my dad was already aware of the situation through my mum's friends expressing their own concerns with a couple of things that had gone on. And I'm sure my dad, having that kind of intimate relationship with my mum, would have noticed things himself, but probably try to not deny it, but think, okay, maybe it's just a one-off kind of situation. But it was from there my dad kind of started the ball rolling in terms of speaking with my mum's GP as to find out what was going on with my mum's health. And after lots of toing and froing, lots of back and forth with different consultants, my mum having a couple of a misdiagnosis basically on a couple of occasions with depression and also a silent stroke. We eventually got a formal diagnosis on the 23rd of June 2010. My mum was 47 and she'd been diagnosed with a rare type of early onset frontotemporal dementia. For those that don't know, frontotemporal dementia is the third most common type of dementia. The most common types are Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia, but there are actually over 200 different types that fall under that kind of dementia bracket. But what makes kind of my mum's the type that my mum lived with kind of more rare is the fact that it's familial FTD, so it's caused by a rare genetic variant or gene fault. And these kind of gene faults only represent 1% of all dementia cases, so it's extremely rare. So yeah, I remember that day back in 2010 basically very vividly, because I'm massively into sport at the time, and it was actually the last group game of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Our school had put on this kind of festival of football, and it was a time where we were celebrating with friends and watching the game. We won 1-0, and I remember going home for some strange reason. My mum or my dad didn't pick me up. I went home with my best friend's parents, and later that evening my dad turned up to the door to pick me up with my mum by his side, and they were both in tears. And as a kind of curious teenager at the age of 15, I peered round the door and tried to listen into what was going on, but couldn't really hear what the conversation was. But it was later that evening, as I say, on the 23rd of June 2010, that my dad pulled myself at the age of 15, my older sister Kennedy at the age of 17, and my younger brother, who was only 9, Kian, into the front room of our family home to tell us that mum had been diagnosed with this rare type of dementia, and it was terminal, and over the next 6 years that we would have to take part in her care on a day-to-day basis, particularly me and Kennedy being, older, and my dad having to continue to get out and pay the bills and put food on the table. So that's exactly what we did over the next 6 years, and we cared for mum every day. Tasks in the early stages started with kind of reassuring mum when she was confused, didn't know where she was. That then deteriorated to a point where she no longer recognised us as her children, was no longer able to communicate, walk or talk. To the last kind of 24 months of her life, she was completely bedridden in the front room of our home. She had to be turned every 4 hours to stop her getting bed sores and being at risk of septicemia. She was completely incontinent. And, along that journey of caring, whilst my dad was out the house, I became my mum's primary carer as a teenager, and my tasks involved picking her up from the front room and taking her all the way to the toilet, kind of physically manhandling her, having to carry her in and out of the bath to clean her up when she was incontinent if she had an accident, helping her eventually when she had to be fitted with a peg to be fed, because she was no longer able to actually eat solid food and things like that. So a very traumatic period in my teenage years, and when we eventually lost my mum at the age of 52 in March 2016, it was only kind of following losing my mum at this time that myself and my sister in particular, began to be curious as to what that meant for us and what the future held for us. Were we at risk of carrying, were we at risk of getting this dementia ourselves? And it turns out that we, as my mum's children, had a 50% chance of inheriting this same form of dementia. So as I say, what makes our circumstances extremely rare is that familial FTD is caused by rare genetic faults. We carry one of the rare genetic variants or faults called the MAPT gene. As a carrier of this gene, so my mum would carry the faulty copy, my dad carries the normal copy. If we were to inherit the normal copy from our dad, we'd have the same risk of anybody in society of inheriting a case of Alzheimer's or dementia. If we were to inherit the faulty copy from our mum, then it means we are guaranteed 99.9% guaranteed to get frontotemporal dementia. More than likely, going off family history in our mid-40s. So we each then kind of embarked on this journey of being genetically tested for this gene which causes FTD. And it was only really through my sister's bravery during that period, having just lost her mum and sharing so many of her characteristics. My sister was kind of convinced, we know science doesn't work like that, but my sister had this kind of she was like convinced that she was just going to have the gene and she was going to get the same dementia as my mum. So seeing her go through that process and the bravery she showed, and then eventually in spring 2018 hearing that she wasn't a carrier of that genetic variant and she was able to move on with her life and start a family, was hugely inspiring for me. So then I followed in her footsteps, did the genetic testing process myself, and in September the 12th 2019 I was told that I am a carrier of the 40 gene, which means that I'm guaranteed to get frontotemporal dementia, as I say, more than likely in my mid-40s. And we know that with such conviction because this isn't something that's just taken my mum's life, it's taken my mum and 12 other relatives in our family getting this type of dementia in their 40s and losing their lives any time between 6 and 10 years from diagnosis. So yeah, overnight from that day in September, I basically became somebody who knew that the clock was ticking. I knew I was going to die of dementia starting in my mid-40s. And I had a decision to make that day, really. I could choose to walk through one or two doors. I could choose to walk through a door where ultimately I could let this kind of genetic circumstance and this quite cruel card that I've been dealt completely consume me and control my life and not really live with any sort of purpose or have any impact. Or I could choose to walk through a door where I had the unique and powerful opportunity to impact millions of lives, using my own living experience and using the very unique circumstances that I found myself in. And that's fortunately what I've chosen to do ever since that day, using running as a vehicle to do that, and tell my story, starting off with kind of running a marathon in my hometown and then obviously progressing to where we are today with all the kind of campaigns we've done. I mean, as I say, that bug for running kind of escalated to running my first marathon in kind of 2020, and that progressed to then running 7 marathons in 7 days in 2022, which was kind of my biggest challenge yet for Alzheimer's Research UK, the leading dementia research charity. Having completed that challenge and raised around £18,000 for the charity, just 6 months later we came crashing back down to earth, hearing that my brother also carried the gene following his genetic test result in February 2023. And from that day we were kind of, I guess, aptly named ourselves the FTD Brothers, and decided to embark on this journey of kind of doubling the power of kind of everything that I tried to create by spinning this, extremely difficult circumstance on its head and creating something, positive and powerful for those living with dementia, but also those in society who haven't had a living experience and those that we need to educate and inform to create change. Unfortunately, my brother wanted to get involved, and since then, I'm sure we'll get into it in the next, hour or so, but we've been able to create things, from running challenges all the way to content to really take things to kind of the next level. And I'm really excited about what the future holds for us as the FTD Brothers. But yeah, sorry to waffle on, but that's kind of the background of why we are the FTD Brothers.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful story, and it's inspiring as well, and I think the social element of what you're doing is so important. I mean, obviously there's an environmental link. Now there's more scientific consensus demonstrating that for every single microgram of fine particle matter that in the air that we breathe, there's the risk of dementia can increase by around 3%. And whilst that sounds quite small, when millions of people are exposed to that, the impact is huge. And it just shows how closely environment and brain health are linked. But clearly, from a social aspect, the power of your platform now is significant, and it's incredibly encouraging and filling people with admiration in terms of what you're doing and how you're choosing to do it, and what you're achieving. But what are the sort of, from a social perspective, and an awareness perspective, what is it that the FTD Brothers are really hoping to achieve with what you're doing at the moment?
Sure, I think for a long time, dementia has kind of been a taboo subject, or it's something that's very misunderstood, and it's only really understood by those who have had a living experience, and that's something that we want to change. You know, there's a common misconception when it comes to dementia that it's a natural part of age, and that it's just something that we should accept when we get to a certain age, and that it's something that broadly really only affects people who are much older in society, and all of those things are simply not true. And I think that the kind of core of our work is to kind of inform and educate those in society and in life who haven't had a living experience, and probably, explain to them the key risk factors when it comes to inheriting a form of the key risk factors when it comes to getting a case of dementia or Alzheimer's, whether it be, caring for a loved one themselves or living with a diagnosis themselves in the future, because this is going to be something that, if nothing changes, 1 in 2 people are going to live with dementia if nothing changes. And within those 14 key risk factors, as you mentioned, pollutants are part of it. And it's something that there are so many things that we would like to educate and inform on, to help broaden people's understanding of something that ultimately is going to affect pretty much everybody in the world we live in. And I think, destigmatizing is an absolutely huge one. People, I think, look at myself and my brother, and when we explain our story with dementia and what is going to ultimately be our future within kind of the next decade, they're absolutely taken back by it, because their kind of stereotypical view of somebody when you mention dementia is somebody probably in their 80s, 90s, in a care home, who maybe forgets names or where they put their cup of tea. And it's so much more vast than that. There's over 200 different types of dementia.
I had no idea. I literally had no
Yeah,
idea
and
that it was, to that extent.
sure, yeah, and I think the thing that's very hard to kind of explain to people who don't have living experience with dementia is you can have, 2 people in the same room who are living with the same form of dementia, but kind of resonate or kind of show symptoms in a very different way, just because it can be based on kind of personality and behavioural changes. And it really, case by case, you can see so many kind of differentiating factors. And that's what makes it so vast and so complex as well to for kind of researchers as well, because it's ultimately a rare brain disease that causes dementias. It's so hard to research and find treatments and hopefully a cure in the future. But I think definitely at the core of everything that we do is kind of destigmatizing, trying to show people that they can play an active part in making life for those kind of people who are living with dementia a little bit better, by showing compassion, patience, time, those kind of things, and understanding that what it actually is to live with dementia, for not just for those who are living with a dementia diagnosis, but the effect it has on kind of carers, loved ones, people who are often kind of unseen when it comes to actually living with the disease. So all of those things are definitely at the centre of the work we're doing and will continue to do.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and absolutely right. The awareness needs to be raised, destigmatization around how this works, and into obviously fundraising as well is a key aspect of what you're looking to achieve, and that's clearly going to enable greater research and systemic change. The reason that you and I met was Chris, our COO at NCZ, runs the SPG golf events, and I know you're a charity partner in that series of events. To date, I think nearly £3,000 have been raised, but they're looking to get to 7,500 by the end of this golfing season. So it's something we're very, very much proud to be supporting. In terms of you and obviously creating a life of purpose around the circumstances that you have, how difficult was it to leave behind the traditional job to focus on what you're doing now, which is obviously extremely meaningful and value driven work, but how difficult was that decision to make?
Sure, very difficult. I think ultimately, I've grounded myself in this purpose, for some selfish reasons as well. It's kind of my coping mechanism when it comes to dealing with my circumstances. And I think that's important to mention. It hasn't, this kind of platform that we've now built, and even the opportunity or the decision and the crossroads to get it to get into the crossroads and the decision to leave my job has been one that's taken, a lot of work since 2018 when I had my diagnosis. And obviously it started with running marathons and talking locally to people who obviously know me about our story, and them supporting us through donations or spreading our story and awareness. And I think it only really became something where I even considered it being kind of full-time role once my brother got diagnosed. Basically, my brother, as I said, got diagnosed in February 2023, and we're like chalk and cheese. It's me and him. I'm very open. I like to talk about my circumstances because it's always helped me. He's very much more, a little bit more withdrawn, and completely respect that we're two different people. But we were, because the way that he is, his personality, we were unsure how he was going to react to obviously his genetic test result. And he sent me this huge text in May of 2023, basically outlining this plan to run the entire length of the UK in 2024, how we would try and get on like mainstream media to raise awareness, start creating informative content about our story online and dementia as a whole, and through how in that calendar year of 2024 we would try and raise £100,000, and we would do that by attempting to run the entire length of the UK. And as soon as he texted me that, we basically did what we could to put a plan in motion with family and friends, and obviously that led to us running the 903-mile 31-day journey from John O'Groats to Land's End in September 2024. An incredible journey that kind of really took us by surprise in terms of how many people really connected with us and our story, and obviously how many people are profoundly affected by dementia across the UK. And we were really, trying to be their voice as much as we were trying to tell our own story. And it was only kind of along that journey, starting to create content in literally the start of 2024, just to my own very small couple of hundred followers on kind of social media, where it grew then across the challenge. As we featured on BBC Breakfast and Good Morning Britain on 4 or 5 occasions across the month. We actually crashed through our fundraising target after 18 days. And ended up raising £250,000 by the end of the year. And where we've built to a point where, by that December of 2024, we'd built to probably around 50,000 followers across 2 platforms. And I attempted this silly challenge around my local track where I was trying to run 982 laps of my local athletics track in 72 hours to represent the 982,000 people living with dementia. And it was that challenge that took us across the £250,000 mark for the £250,000 mark for the calendar year. I basically couldn't complete the full laps. I got to about 455 laps, and the money just kept piling in. And it was that when I realised kind of that support that we'd built across the year, and then to see like local people from the community who had supported us throughout the calendar year come down and like take laps off me and just want to contribute to what we were doing.
Wow.
It was like at the back of that challenge, I said to my wife, I don't think I can go back to work. I just think this is what I'm meant to do now. And I had no savings behind me. I went from being a painting decorator, self-employed, kind of, you just working with my dad and uncle, which was great. I had great flexibility to do like a lot of the public speaking that I do and the advocacy and creating content. But it got to that point where it was like, I choose either this career, which is sustainable, great income, take almost the business off my dad and my uncle and hopefully grow it to new levels, employ some people and live kind of a normal kind of life, which would be great, but do I kind of ground myself in this purpose in seeing the impact that I've already had, and then almost take that to new levels? And I just felt that when I stripped it all back, what was going to give me kind of the most fulfillment in life, what was going to what was most important to me over the next kind of 10, 15 years. And I felt that if I never gave it a go in terms of trying to be a full-time advocate, then I never would. So I made the leap thankfully with the support and the help of my wife. She's ultimately, up until now, pretty much had to provide for us, whilst I try and navigate the wild world of being kind of a social media content creator and full-time advocate. But we've got to a point now where I'm working with some brands that are really believing, but those brands also recognise that I want to have kind of long term relationships. I want that sustainability when it comes to being an advocate. I want brands that actually believe in what we're trying to do, the message that we're trying to spread, the work that we're trying to do. And I'm working with a couple at the moment, Pure Sport. We did a campaign in June where they were doing a tour of the UK, all the major cities in the UK. And I worked with them on a campaign where literally anybody could sign up to do a 5K, post it on Strava and tag Pure Sport and us, and they would donate £1 back to dementia research. And it's all about working with brands who basically do believe in the message and don't just believe in kind of their return on investment, and there is things to be doing in the community and in society that are important, that have a lasting impact. And that kind of moves us on to the journey that I'm into now. At the moment we're literally in the process at the moment of filling in forms to set up our own foundation. So our own community interest company, where we'll basically allow me and Kian to be sustainable advocates, hopefully through different funding methods, and hopefully touching in on the kind of corporate responsibility and things like that, where I feel like they have work to do, and we'll be able to give back by coming into those big corporate firms and be able to tell our story and showing the impact that they can have and how it's going to affect them in the future, and kind of that responsibility we have as a society, but also in businesses, in corporate organisations, that they also have a responsibility to make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic way of doing it, because there's businesses out there are looking for what they can do. They want to demonstrate social responsibility. They want to support, and from that perspective, so much can be achieved. Obviously, that was one of the reasons with the SPG golf events, is that within that sort of built environment, for instance, the FM sector as well, and understanding where they can provide support, and the impact that they're achieving by doing so. And I think it's really key. So obviously, touching base with you in terms of how that message can be made, and the support that they can give. How can listeners and obviously businesses out there, how can they show up in that sort of socially responsible way, and particularly how can they support you and the FTD Brothers?
Sure. I mean, the main thing that we usually say to people that want to support us is hugely valuable to us at the moment with the way my career is if they can follow our journey online on any of our kind of social media channels at the FTD Brothers, follow, like, share. That all that engagement really helps our journey. I think when it comes to kind of businesses and corporations, I think with us looking to set up our own foundation, we really want to touch in on, we'll continue to be kind of fundraisers for charities like Alzheimer's Research UK and For a Cure, and give back in that way. But through our own foundation, we're hoping to really touch the people within their community in terms of businesses and corporates. So if they're willing to kind of contribute towards, creating a foundation which can give back in their local community, then that would be great. Having those conversations about how they can kind of fund our journey and support that and give back in a way which works for them, and they can visibly see the impact that we're having in their community would be also just as valuable. So yeah, that's two ways I guess they can give back, and I hope to see lots of new people from this kind of following along. And obviously appreciate the support that Chris and yourself have given us. It's hugely great. It's massively impactful to have conversations like this, but also the golf days and spreading our awareness through different corporates and businesses and people in that kind of sector is hugely important to us. And obviously the money raised is absolutely appreciated and going to such worthy cause as well too. So
Absolutely, no. It's a pleasure to support, and anything we can do in terms of raising awareness is something that we want to do. I'm really full of admiration in terms of what you're doing, in terms of what you're choosing to do, and how you're choosing to take your situation and ultimately do something that leaves a lasting legacy and benefits so many other people. How important is that brand partnership? And what is it that you look for when looking to engage and collaborate with a supply partner or with a brand?
Sure, yeah. I think one thing that I look for is, again, believing in actually what we're trying to do. So for me, it's more about longevity than it is kind of even, I guess, the visibility or anything like that. It's more about, does the brand, when you have those conversations in terms of a collaboration, do they actually understand the messaging behind what we're trying to do? Do they believe in kind of the long-term impact they can have whilst working with us? And it is genuinely only authentic kind of long-term relationships that we look for because of that. And it's difficult because when I've been thrown into the industry at the deep end, I've had some kind of conversations with brands in the early stages where you're thinking of the best way to make it sustainable, but then it's probably not a brand that's the right fit. So you have to make a lot of kind of difficult but true to yourself decisions. You have to remain authentic and think what is ultimately going to resonate with my audience as well. I only want to work with brands that genuinely I can integrate my content with them and our messaging into their, whether it be a product or a service. I only want to work with ones that it feels natural and that would serve my community somehow. So when it comes to having those conversations, it can be difficult because it doesn't always align. And there's definitely periods in time where I have to kind of take a step back and think of, okay, how is that going to serve my community? And that, I think, has to always stay at the core of all the decisions we make. But for me, the number one thing is about longevity. That relates to kind of brand deals, but it also relates to brand deals and partnerships, but that also relates to what we want to do kind of as the FTD Brothers and our foundation. We want to set up something that doesn't just have lasting impact whilst we're here. We want it to be something that either our family or people can continue to continue to kind of keep our flame alive after we lose our lives to dementia, because ultimately that's, if nothing changes, that's the way it's heading. And we want to create something that serves the community all across the UK and beyond, and by always making sure that those kind of long-term interests are there and that we are serving those that ultimately are living with dementia and the people at the centre of our community. I think that's hugely important and will always be the main focus. So yeah.
Well, clearly it's working. I mean, what you're doing is building a movement, not just a moment. It's incredibly inspiring and growing so significantly as well. So it's that's fantastic to see. What would some of the highlights be? I mean, you guys have already achieved some incredible things. With the fundraising and the public speaking and the reach and the engagement that you're getting. But what are some of the highlights that you'd want to share at the moment that have been some of those moments that you thought, actually, we're getting somewhere here?
Yeah, I think ultimately, for me, kind of the ones where you think like hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I think day 18 on the challenge, when we ran from Johnny Groats to Land's End. We were invited into the studio in Manchester. We'd ran through Warrington. We had a 5 a.m. wake up call to go to the studio and be on BBC Breakfast. And we'd hit about 50. We were on about £50,000 at the time. We were hoping to raise 100k within kind of the month, and it was starting to look like we may not get there, or we'll crawl to get there. And we sat on the sofa and we spoke about our story openly. And I think it was like the second or third time we'd been on in the space of a couple of weeks, which was incredible. But we spoke honestly on the sofa, and I remember walking off the sofa and refreshing our phones to see what the target was on, and it was like a glitch. It went up by about £60,000 in about 4 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up crashing through our 100k target, and it was just one of those moments where it just not that it wouldn't be worth it if the fundraising wasn't there, because it's serving us too, and I know we're helping so many people. But that was one of those moments where you think, wow, this is really going somewhere. People are really starting to believe in the work that we're doing, and just I think continuing to receive messages from people on a daily basis on social media who thank us for the work that we're doing, quite vulnerably open up about their own experiences, whether it be caring for a loved one with dementia, or maybe having a rare form that's caused by genetics themselves, and be encouraged to go for a genetic test, or anything where we've given some sort of comfort or value to the audience and the community that we're trying to serve. I think is hugely powerful and will always continue to be. And then, in the past week, we've had, for me, kind of another milestone was I've had a conversation with Mission to Mars Foundation, who are the founders of Albert Schloss and Rudy's Pizza, and that they're really going to try and work closely with us, hopefully over the next kind of 12 months, to see how they can support this mission as the FTD Brothers, which hopefully will include kind of the launch of our foundation and things like that. So I constantly feel like, you have these periods of time where it can feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall and you're working really hard and you're not really seeing a lot of progress, even though there's probably people on the outside who are thinking, wow, this is incredible. When you're inside it can be quite difficult to see those kind of that progress. And then when you have these conversations, it takes one conversation or one kind of moment in time, and I look back now on the journey that we've been on since my diagnosis and where we are, over nearly 400,000 followers across 2 short form platforms, raised over £340,000 towards dementia research, on the brink of setting up our own foundation, working with some incredible brands like ASICS, Pure Sport, Runner, the leading coaching app software. And we're in a very blessed situation, and just so grateful for the journey that we're on. But it also then motivates me to want to do more and make it even bigger. I'd love to create something in terms of the foundation and as a legacy that really does outlast our time here on Earth, and that really does feel like the trajectory that I'm on. How long it'll take us to get there, I don't know. And this isn't just about us. I don't say that from kind of an egotistical view. I'm doing this from a point of, there are so many people unheard and unseen when it comes to dementia, who don't feel like they have a voice, who don't feel like they can share their journey and their experience, and we want to be the voice for all of those people, and creating something which connects for them and gives them value and comfort is definitely what we want to continue to build, and hopefully it will be a legacy that kind of stands the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things I'm so impressed with is that is your storytelling and the vulnerability in that, and the openness about what you're doing, because I think that's what's clearly resonating so well with others, because it's such a true and real story that they feel like they're understanding it more, I think. Is it a challenge to stay grounded when the visibility is growing so much and you're doing some of these amazing sort of high profile things? Is that a challenge, or is that something that is now part and parcel of everyday life?
I think it is hard at times, not necessarily to stay grounded, but just to keep up with the kind of exponential growth of kind of, particularly on social media, our channels, and the way it's, I've literally been chucked in at the deep end. I had no idea about content creation. I've had to go from being very basic content creator to kind of having to learn and understand the industry more in terms of it being my full-time job. I've been very fortunate that we connected with the likes of Simon Squibb, and his partnerships manager Johnny has been absolutely influential in everything that I've done, the support that he's shown me, and works literally free of charge, not just out the goodness of his heart to help us, kind of as brothers, and me in particular, kind of know my worth within the industry. So I'm not that brands will take advantage of you, but ultimately they're businesses and they have to work kind of in their best interest. But yeah, he's helped me in so many ways in terms of the best way to grow the channel, the channel and everything that we're trying to do, and gaining his advice. And it's definitely difficult, I think, when you're in the industry like social media, and our story is very different. It's got huge social impacts, in terms of real impact for something like dementia. And I think sometimes I find myself comparing myself to kind of influencers who are in a very different niche, and the opportunities that they're getting and the exposure, when it might not that it's not a meaningful cause, but you always feel like you want those opportunities for our own cause, and it can be quite difficult. I think one thing I also struggle with is kind of time management. Weekends seem to kind of no longer exist for me anymore. It's all merged into one, and that's something that I think we've kind of with my wife, we're really trying to learn and kind of adapt as a kind of navigate this career, and setting those kind of boundaries, because it is really difficult, when I've grounded myself in purpose, and it is kind of the thing that gives me this license to live and has really enabled me to live any sort of quality of life, and has really pushed me forward. Sometimes I can get carried away in it, and forget to actually enjoy life as a husband, and as a normal young man, really. So it is difficult, but ultimately grounding myself in this purpose is what has enabled me to be quite level-headed, and very focused on doing something ultimately that is bringing good, for most part, to a lot of people. So yeah, it will continue to be crazy, I'm sure, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, you've got the focus, but you're right. It's important to find the balance as well, because it can be so consuming in terms of what you're doing. So yeah, I'm glad that you've got that handle on that, which is great. What does the future look like in terms of goals, legacy? What kind of challenges have you got coming up? Any sort of outlandish goals and plans in place for what comes next? What does that look like?
Sure. So I mean, immediate goals in terms of this year. I've already ran 3 marathons this year, official ones, but I've got 2 more to do. So me and my
Just
brother,
another two, right?
yeah, me and my brother are running the Sydney Marathon, which is its first year at being one of the World Abbott Majors. We're running at the end of August together, so never been to Australia. It'll be a chance to kind of tell our story in a different part of the world, and hopefully connect with people living with dementia out there, but also, share an experience together. We're hoping our dad's going to come with us, and spend some time together on a little boys trip, and create some memories, which is also a huge part of this journey. And then 3 weeks later, I'm attempting to run my quickest marathon yet, kind of a personal goal, which is a part of the work that I'm doing with Runner, at the Berlin Marathon, as I say. So going to try and run a sub-3 hour marathon for the first time in Berlin, which is taking up a lot of my time outside of content and all the conversations I have work-wise. I'm training kind of 5-6 days a week for that at the moment. But then in terms of kind of our next big kind of fundraiser and campaign, it will be next year. In spring next year, we're looking to run 32 marathons in consecutive days in Ireland, which is basically a nod to my mum's Irish roots. The part of my mum side of the family are the ones who have obviously been inherently devastated by FTD and this familial type of FTD, and we really want to embrace kind of the Irish side of my family, and my roots and my brother's roots, and go out there and speak for those in Ireland who are living with dementia. And we fortunately, at the start of the year, we were on the Tommy Tiernan show in Ireland, and we were really well received by the Irish community online. And yeah, we'd love to go out there and again raise a ton of money towards research or our foundation, whichever we choose, and really have an even bigger impact and grow to a new audience in Ireland. And then who knows, I've got some kind of big dreams for the future. I think more than anything now, it's about hopefully building this foundation with my brother and creating this obviously legacy, and building and spreading the message in terms of, we'd love to kind of go on a tour of giving talks across schools and colleges in the UK, even in corporations and business too, about dementia, and linking back to kind of that informative duty, and raising awareness and destigmatizing, which is at the centre of everything we do. And then when it comes to physical challenges, I've just got this urge. Don't ask me why, but I've always had this little scratch, that I want to run coast to coast Canada. So Terry Fox.
It's quite a big country, don't you?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the
So
second biggest in the world.
Terry Fox. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but
Yeah, I am, because I
yeah.
actually I grew up in Canada, so
Oh
I grew
wow!
up in
So
Vancouver.
he's Terry Fox is one of my biggest inspirations in terms of
Oh
kind
wow.
of the Terry Fox Foundation, everything it stands for, that legacy that still lives on today, and the hundreds of millions of Canadian dollars that still continue to be raised for his foundation is something that I really look up to, and would love to even reach a small percentage of what
Yeah.
kind of that lasting impact he's had, and just retracing his steps, and doing what he did is something that I've just always wanted to do. Um, but yeah, we'll see. That's a few years off, a lot of training away, but that's the kind of campaigns we want to do. And then I think just continue to build this FTD Brothers legacy more than anything, and create
Yeah.
memories and stuff for my family as we go, and live the best, most fulfilled life I can whilst I have the opportunity to.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing all the right things, and like I said, it's incredibly inspiring with what you're doing. I urge everyone to follow the FTD Brothers on the socials. I assume that's where you'll announce various different things that you're doing, and how people can get involved, support the cause, to donate, to raise awareness, and all of it. I really appreciate your time, and like I said to everyone, definitely follow. You've dropped so many nuggets of sort of wisdom as well. I mean, you were talking about, I saw on Instagram, you were talking about just like mental attitude of when you go for a run. Was it 10 minutes rule? So if you run for 10 minutes and if you still feel like, I'm not into this, just turn around and go back, but at least that's a 20-minute run, you've done something. I thought that was excellent. Stuff like that is great, but you could incorporate that into all walks of personal and professional life. So yeah, I definitely urge everyone to give you guys a follow. Thank you once again, and all the very best. We're definitely going to have you back on the podcast, because I want to hear. Well, first of all, I'm coming with you to Canada, because I'll be the guy that hands out the drinks or some form of support. Definitely can't do that kind of running. But thanks, Jordan. I really appreciate your time, and we'll catch up again really soon.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Emission Possible. If today's episode sparked an idea or presented a challenge, please reach out and let us know. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned, because net zero is absolutely possible.